everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with your final hot take of the evening. And I wanted to do one about the beer virus, not just about New Jersey, but just in, general. I wanted to use my screenwriter abilities to speculate. Speculation, YouTube. I'm not a doctor. So this is what I think is going to happen with the beer virus as we move forward. I think that at this point, the beer virus has become a political hot potato and has been politicized or weaponized, as they say in the media, mostly by the Democrats to hurt Trump, because everything's about hurting Trump at this point for them. So up until the election, you're going to see them step on the gas and step off of it in terms of the beer virus. Because, a lot of what the Democrats do just don't work. It just doesn't work. Some of it they think works because they have control of the media, and the media keeps telling them, oh, you're doing great. You're doing great, Democrats. Keep it up. You're winning. And a percentage of their people actually believe that nonsense or want to, so they kind of lie to themselves and say, yeah, we're winning. Joe Biden's ahead in the polls. How could we lose? But they're also laying the groundwork for them being sore losers about it, and hopefully, from their perspective, to be able to fight in court a battle to win if the election is very close. Or to make Donald Trump go away if it's very close and they win and there's some discrepancies, let's say. If there's a lot of discrepancies and the election was close, it's going to be a nightmare. I don't think the election's going to be close. I think Trump's going to run away with it, and the Democrats are likely to just say, well, we've lost. There's no way we could steal that many votes, so we're just going to have to suck it up. So I'm going with that particular scenario with this speculation. So they're going to keep stepping on the gas and stepping off of it in terms of the beer virus up until the election. At the election, the key thing will be, don't go to the voting polls, mail in your ballot, because you'll die if you go to the polling locations are rife with beer virus. You can't go. That's going to be the last big play of the whole beer virus thing, unless something major happens before then, which I kind of doubt with the beer virus. It's just going to be, don't go anywhere near it, because you're going to get sick and die if you go vote, especially you old people, because, older people tend to be Republican. And that'll be pushed in states that are close. Now, in terms of cheating, I think the Democrats and Republicans both cheat, but the Democrats have made an art form out of it. They have a long history of cheating. I think, and the cheating tends to be the Republicans knock people off the rolls and the Democrats add people. So their play might be to turn it all around, but definitely these mail-in ballots are going to be, pushed onto us as if, well, these are legitimate. You're discounting people's votes. But if you're in a democratically controlled state, the way it'll work is, oh, here's a vote for Joe Biden. This is fine. Here's a vote for Trump. Well, it looks like they forgot to fill in the date. This one's invalid. Into the trash. And that's kind of the way it will go. Every Trump ballot will be scrutinized, and every tiny mistake will get it disqualified, whereas every Democratic vote for Biden will just be blindly counted, and if there's a discrepancy, it'll just be ignored. That's how you cheat in an election, because no one's going to recount the votes. It may be that the House ends up voting, and they'll vote Trump in because, as Tim Pool keeps saying, apparently the Republicans control more electorates, which I don't understand how that works, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. I think Trump's going to run away with it. Now, after the election, what happens? Well, the question is, do the Democrats benefit in any way from keeping up this facade? And if the answer is no, do they benefit in any way from undoing the facade that the virus is as bad as it is? Now, I'm not denying there's a virus. There is a virus. It's deadly. You should be wary, especially if you have comorbidities or if you're elderly. However, it's not that bad if you look at the statistics. Really, if you get it, it's very, very likely you'll survive. And the cases tend to be more asymptomatic. But I think what's going to happen after the election is the Democrats will start to pivot to try to make Trump a lame duck president and start to go after anybody they perceive as having a chance in 2024, probably Pence. And the pivot will go something like, well, as it turns out, the number of beer virus cases were overcounted in many Republican states. And the reason they'll do that narrative is because the real overcounting was most likely in Democratic states. But of course, there'll be some overcounting in the Republican ones too, because everybody wanted to get a little sweet, sweet cash. Also in Republican states with hospitals who are overcounting in order to get cash. The idea will be to smear the red states first and then later mention the blue states, but they're like on page 3 of the story, so who cares? And they sort of get mentioned, but see, no, you have in your mind the red states are the problem, and then the blue states get mentioned, but they don't get any attention. Because I do believe they're overcounting. Project Veritas did a thing on funeral homes in New York that were definitely overcounting the beer virus cases. And there were medical staff in the video that were saying, yeah, they're counting anybody. But I think there's also going to be a heavy reckoning for Democrats in that because they're going to lose so much in this election, people will actually start to question whether or not a Democratic Party even still exists, or whether it's time to abandon it for something else. At that point, you're going to see some of those rich people just jump ship. They're just going to jump out of the Democratic Party because they'll just see it as a sinking ship. There's no point in propping it up. Might as well get on the Republican brand, the Republicans' good side now. And that will be mostly whatever remaining Democrats aren't ideologically driven. Mostly that's what you have left now. You have the elites who are just so ideologically driven against Trump that they can't see the forest from the trees. They'll stay. They'll go down with the ship. There'll also be a small percentage of the general population who will insist that beer virus is as rampant as the blue states pushed, prior to the election. They will be still caught up in this hysteria. Just like we had people who still insist Iraq had mass weapons of destruction, we're still going to have people who insist the beer virus is very real, very deadly, being spread constantly. You could die of it any minute, and they'll continue to wear masks long after everybody else is over with it. In terms of mask, I think the mask will stay for flu seasons because it's a good idea. But I don't think it's going to survive much after that. After that, it'll just start to fade. People are already starting to get sick of it. They want to go back to their lives. They want to have parties again and go to the movies and go to restaurants. That pressure is going to be so great that by the time the election is over, I think, for instance, my governor, Phil Murphy, will realize that he has an election to win next year in 2021, and he's got to rebuild the damn economy so he could come out and say, see, I saved everybody. And what you're going to see over the next months following the beer virus into 2021, you're going to see these Democratic states do the opposite. They're going to actually ignore cases of the beer virus. They're going to stop counting. They're going to reevaluate the way they count beer virus deaths and hospitalizations, and then suddenly it's going to drop to almost nothing because they're going to say, well, we looked at the science again, and turns out we were overcounting, and now we know, and so now everything's good. And you're going to look back on that and go, what the F? I closed my business and went out of business, and now you telling me you made a mistake? And over the next couple of years, throughout the Trump administration, they'll come out with study after study showing that the beer virus was bad, but it wasn't that bad, and that a lot of what we did really didn't help. In fact, some of what we did actually hurt. And they'll try to tie that to Trump and the Republicans, but really, good luck. They'll say they'll do studies on states that closed and that didn't close. They'll do studies on states like New Jersey and New York that got a lot of people sick in the beginning. And I think the eventual conclusion will be that the beer virus spread so quickly it inoculated most people, and that's why it died off. And really, a lot of what we did didn't do much other than maybe flatten the curve so the hospitals wouldn't get overwhelmed, which was the goal in the beginning anyway. But there'll be so many other problems in terms of a nationwide depression, possibly. So many people will be poor and out of work. Hopefully over the next Trump administration, he'll be able to really mitigate a lot of that and maybe get us out of the hole by the time he leaves office. It's going to be tight. But I think by the time that happens, you look at 2021, 2022, the beer virus will be a distant memory. The only thing left of that will be, every flu season they'll say, well, you should really mask up, social distance, and wash your hands. And people will probably start doing that just during flu season, but no other time. Because it makes sense to do it in flu season. I'm not against it, but to make it mandatory, well, that'll be a different thing. They won't be able to do that. And any state that has mandatory stuff, hopefully that'll get rolled back. I don't know if Murphy's bill is going to pass here mandating the mask. Certainly Dr. Birx's suggestion that you wear a mask at home is idiotic in the extreme, in my view. But I think you're going to, 2-3 years from now, beer virus? Oh, yeah, that was 2020. Yeah, that was crazy. That's the way it's going to be. No one's going to be wearing a mask. We're going to be back to normal. And you're going to have a red tidal wave of Republicans. It's not just going to be this election. It's going to be in 2022, the midterms too. That's how bad this is. See, the Democrats don't understand what they've unleashed. People want Democrats gone, for the most part. Now, there are a few hardcore areas. You'll never get rid of Democrats. But by the time this is over, the Democrats will be, my prediction, where Karl Rove said. They're going to be a minority party that probably won't gain any sort of traction for decades to come. The only option will be to start new parties, like possibly the Libertarians could finally take a couple of states or something like that. But maybe even a couple of the Green Party members could get in. What's not going to get in are BLM and Marxists. Those guys will be crushed once Trump is reelected. And what I mean by crushed, there'll be no reason for Trump to put up with these knuckleheads any longer. None. And most likely, by the time the election rolls around, by the time next year rolls around, the FBI will have undermined these knuckleheads to such an extent that they won't even be able to function anymore. The only guys you'll have left are a handful of rioters who try to go out and cause mayhem, but there just won't be enough of them. These guys are going away, a bunch of them, for 5 to 10 years. They won't be remembered for their valiant sacrifice. When you gut an organization of its most valued members, it falls apart. Unless there's somebody immediately there to pick up the baton and run with it. And some of these organizations will survive in that they'll still be around, they'll still have T-shirts and whatnot, but they won't be a functioning group anymore. they're going to break them at least to the point where they can't riot. They can't get more than 10 people at a particular place. You know, that it'll be so draconian, the changes. They'll make sure that, you know, you can't get anywhere near a courthouse. That if you light fireworks off at a courthouse, they'll pass federal laws if they have to. If you light fireworks at a courthouse or any explosive, you'll be arrested and do 2 years in jail in a federal pen. That'll undermine Antifa somewhat. But I think what they really need to do, you know, in terms of this beer virus, is just let everybody go back to work. Just let everybody go back to work and try to make life, you know, as normal as possible. Right, little doggy? Anyhow, I've gone on long enough. Little Joan is sleepy. I got to put her in her tiny bed. So we will see you tomorrow.